Good day and welcome to the webinar series HIV and Faith in Resilience and Renewal. My name is Ulysses Burley and I am the founder of UV The Cure LLC, and I'm honored to serve as the moderator for today's conversation. HIV and Faith in Resilience and Renewal is a webinar series developed by the US HIV and AIDS Faith Coalition. The series explores the 40-year legacy of US faith communities toward ending the HIV and AIDS epidemic as a public health crisis. It features conversations with a variety of leaders from faith-based organizations, houses of worship, community organizations, and government agencies who address the intersections of race, class, gender, sex, sexuality, and religion in the history of the HIV response in the United States, and identify lessons learned, offer insights, and share their vision for what will be needed to end the epidemic as a public health crisis. The event centers the commentary of faith actors from multiple faith traditions and practices, people living with HIV, and HIV practitioners who have been involved in the HIV and AIDS advocacy since the beginning of the epidemic. Our first conversation explored the history of the Black Church's response to HIV and AIDS, where Carrie Goodman and Dr. Vanessa walked us through the maturation of the National Week of Prayer for the Healing of AIDS. Today's webinar, the second in our HIV and Faith in Resilience and Renewal series, features Reverend Edwin Sanders and Khadijah Abdullah in a conversation centered around the emergence and observance of National Faith HIV and AIDS Awareness Day. Edwin Sanders is Senior Servant of Metropolitan Interdenominational Church in Nashville, Tennessee, whose mission is being inclusive of all and alienating to none. Sanders founded Metropolitan in 1981, and by 1984, the church began serving persons living with HIV. Reverend Sanders brings the unique perspective of faith and spirituality into the discussion of global HIV and AIDS education, research, and treatment. He has presented at 9 international AIDS conferences and serves on many national boards, including the National Minority AIDS Council and the PEPFAR Scientific Advisory Board. Khadijah Abdullah is the Executive Director of Rahma, whose mission is to address HIV and AIDS in faith communities through education, advocacy, and empowerment. Khadijah founded Rahma in 2012 as she recognized the need to provide HIV education in the American Muslim community. Khadijah continues to look for innovative and powerful ways to make a greater impact and eliminate stigma, including evolving Rahma to focus on HIV in all faith communities. In 2017, Khadijah founded National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, which has since been recognized by the federal government as an official national HIV and AIDS observance day. She is the recipient of numerous awards for her efforts and achievements, including the President Obama Award for Volunteerism in 2010. Mm-hmm. After what I'm sure will be a robust conversation between Reverend Sanders and Mrs. Abdullah, we will hear responses from Bhikkhu Sāgarānanda Tien and Ms. Vanessa Johnson to offer comments on what they heard and the significance of National Faith HIV and AIDS Awareness Day to them. Venerable Sāgarānanda Tien is a Buddhist monk who was born and raised in Taiwan. He came to the US for graduate studies in engineering, where he earned his master and PhD degrees. Sāgarānanda is a resident monk and the secretary of US Zen Institute in Germantown, Maryland, a Buddhist organization promoting Buddhist teachings and meditative praxis. He considers himself a student of religion, literature, philosophy, art, and science. Ms. Vanessa Johnson, JD, is the owner of the Washington, D.C.-based Ribbon Consulting Group. Ribbon provides consulting and technical assistance services in the area of chronic health conditions and disabilities. As a person of faith and a person living with HIV for 30 years, Vanessa serves on the National Steering Committee for the Framework for Dialogue, a project that brings people living with HIV together with faith leaders for dialogue and joint actions to reduce and eliminate HIV-related stigma. Vanessa is a board member of the National Working Positive Coalition and a founding board member of the National Women and AIDS Collective, the Positive Women's Network USA, the National Black Women's HIV and AIDS Network, and the United States People Living with HIV Caucus. Thank you in advance to all of our speakers for your valuable contributions. I want to also thank our ASL interpreter, Ashley Jaliza Middleton, for making this event accessible to the hearing impaired. At this time, I invite Reverend Sanders and Khadijah into conversation about National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day, followed by our 2 respondents, and then we'll open up the floor for written questions and comments from our viewers on all platforms, including Zoom and Facebook. Reverend Sanders and Khadijah, you have the floor.
Khadijah, let me just tell you, it's an honor just to be able to share this moment with you.
Likewise.
I've been so excited about you and the work that you initiated. This is our 4th year, and I guess I was honored to be a part of the very first year that we had the National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. It's important, I think, because in the midst of moments like this, I'm convinced that's where creative energies flow. And I'm also very much impacted by the way in which transformative experiences happen in the lives of persons who share in these moments. I was thinking about this experience and could not help but appreciate the fact that perhaps what has been most significant to me as this reality of this day has evolved is the momentum that has been built over the years, and the way in which there's been an openness to so many from different faith traditions to feel that this was an opportunity that they wanted to avail themselves of and to be a part. I think that has a lot to do with the spirit and the energy that Sister Khadijah brings to this particular experience that we're having today. I couldn't help also but think, as Dr. Burley made reference to the last conversation that we hosted, I guess last month, that was very important to me then, the way in which we heard a commentary that talked about the kind of long-term impact the efforts of a single individual can make and have. I think of that whenever I think about you, Khadijah, because clearly, I think when I first heard the call from you and recognized that what you were developing and what you were envisioning was something that I knew was definitely, needed. And the fact that you have brought us to this point is of profound significance by itself. And perhaps most significant in my mind, though, is the way in which so many different faith communities have opened their hearts and their minds to wanting to be a part of this, in terms of not only theoretically and philosophically and theologically even who they are, but also the cultural blend and the way in which I think it's enhanced all of our lives. I think that's a profound kind of reality and contribution. So I'm excited about being a part of the conversation, because I do know that it very often is the byproduct of that which represents the passion, the dedication, and the commitment of single individuals, and what that can mean in terms of impact that goes beyond the ordinary. So I think that's a starting point for me in the conversation. It's a compliment to you, but it's also a statement that makes clear to so many others who might be watching, who have found themselves trying to understand how they would take a vision, a dream, an idea that they have and advance it, irrespective of the fact that sometimes you don't necessarily get all of the level of participation that you would like, but determination really does translate into where we are today.
Well, Thank you for saying that, Reverend Sanders. And I do want to say that it wasn't a single person effort. This really made the day move forward this way through a team of wonderful people like yourself and like Ulysses, Dr. Burley, and Elder George Kerr, and Carrie Goodman, and William Francis, and Cedric Pulliam, and all the amazing people who've come out and really tried to bring this day together. I couldn't have done it alone. So I'm thankful to everyone who has contributed their time and their effort to making this day an official awareness day. We pushed hard for this for the past 4 years. So we're really excited when we found out early August that it's recognized by HIV.gov, and that, you know, people across the country and even globally are recognizing Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. The vision for Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day came from that, you know, I'm Muslim, I come from a faith community, and when I was growing up, we didn't have much education on sexual health. So don't you think about HIV and AIDS. And I was in college, I met a Muslim with AIDS. He had progressed to the AIDS stage. And, you know, he was in the hospital, and he let me know that he didn't feel safe in his faith community. So initially I did start Rahma focusing on the Muslim community because I realized we didn't really talk about this. But as time grew on, I met people from all diverse backgrounds and just amazing people that I really wanted to just kind of focus on all faiths. But so Faith Awareness Day kind of came out of that idea. And working with Dr. Burley, we did some webinars together in the past, and is asking him and others who would be willing to engage in this. They would reach out to their networks and to their friends. And that's how I met you. I was really excited to meet you. I heard so many amazing things about you. And I was like, I can't wait to Reverend Edwin Sanders. When I first met you, I felt I was in awe. You have done so much in the HIV and AIDS world that, I mean, it's amazing. Even before I was born, like since 1981, you had your church, and 1984, a lot of people to come into your space. You know, that's really, really amazing. And I appreciate you. So I want to make that statement towards you because you are remarkable. So I'm happy to share this with you today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. And I can't wait to talk with you more.
Well, you know, Khadijah, one of the things that I want to just share with you again, I gave some hint of it in my opening statement, but I remember that day 4 years ago when we started. And one of the things that I always appreciate about moments like that, I guess I should tell you, Khadijah, a lot of people don't realize that the only earned degree I have is in anthropology. So there's a sense in which I'm a preaching anthropologist more than I am a theologian. But I will tell you that that day, what I found to be so powerful, and I think one of the things that we should try to continue to cultivate and build upon, is that even though we had different languages, and even though we had different dress and different histories, there's a way in which the cultural dynamic of that day was so powerful, because even though there might have been what for some people could have represented barriers as far as the language of our communication, it seemed to me that the energy was one that day, and that the various traditions that were represented were so powerful in their expression that I think all of us left there uplifted, that there's a sense in which we were rejuvenated. If we came weary, I think we came with some degree of revitalization. And I would pray that what would happen as we continue to go forward with this day is that it would be one that would be known for bringing that kind of energy to this whole reality. The other thing that I found myself thinking about more and more as we've tried to understand, even as we moved into this other arena of talking also about this COVID-19 virus, is that a movement is very important. And I think what you're doing is a part of a movement. I don't quite see the movement dynamic yet, but I think it's coming in terms of the COVID issue. But I do know that one thing that always is characteristic of movements is that movements have a spirit. There's a way in which people are reaching, and there are people who are stretching in terms of the ways in which they try to see and conceptualize and understand things. A movement is something that gives you a sense of purpose that will take you beyond whatever the obstacles and stumbling blocks are. So I think that's a part of what I want to continue to see happen as this day progresses over the years to come. And that is that spirit of a movement will occur. You know, you can get legislation and you can get change that has structural, and even in some instances, it will be, you know, systemic and systematic change. But the real change is when change comes in folks' hearts. And I think the change in folks' hearts occurs when there's a level of interaction that allows you to overcome the stumbling blocks, no matter how they might manifest themselves. That's what I think is happening with this. And the other thing is, of course, you've done it on weekends and you've done it on days that stretch the holy days pretty much of all of us. Our days are not necessarily primarily the same, but when you do it in a time frame like that, what you've done, it means that it's something that's been brought into the picture of that which represents who we are as spiritual and religious beings.
So to your point in regards to a movement, I think that it could have possibly definitely reached that point. I know when we first started, it was a nice small group of us here in DC. We also had ambassadors, like we had Brian Jones in Ohio and Shalom and DeAndre. Unfortunately, there was a hurricane that year, so he couldn't really hold an event. And we had Larry and we had Aaron and we had Priya and we had Saravan. So we had so many different ambassadors across the country are trying to do events. And I think it'd be a great movement if it happened in every single state. But I think we have a long way to go. And I think with having it recognized, you know, on HIV.gov, more people are aware about it. Like this year, when we started doing our events for this year, people were reaching out saying, I heard about this event, I want to be involved for next year. And to me, that I'm so excited to like see that, because I think the more people that get involved, the more we can reach our ultimate goal of ending stigma in faith communities. That's the main reason why we're doing this. People are not feeling safe in their faith community, don't feel welcome, they're feeling ostracized. So by having this awareness day and speaking out and, you know, holding our faith leaders accountable, talk about it from the pulpit or from the minibar or in their khutbahs or their jumas or their sermons, it can really create that safe space we're looking for and make sure they're educating themselves, especially on language, the words they're using, because that can be, you know, stigmatizing as well, and just creating that safe space. And then in regards to the different days, we are trying to be cognizant of people's faith days. So for example, Muslims, our day is on Friday. So we had an imam lead a prayer on Friday. And then yesterday, it was a Sabbath, but we still had a rabbi able to come out and she led an amazing prayer. And then today is Sunday, the Christian Religious Day, we had Pastor Will. So we're really trying to incorporate all religions, really make it truly interfaith. We have been in spaces where maybe one or two faiths, we're trying to encompass as many faiths as possible and like really pull everyone together. And one thing that really empowered me after the first year is we had Priya from the Sikh community, she was the ambassador, and she was saying that she was now feeling empowered to go back to her community and do HIV testing on site and education and awareness. And so that's what we want. We want people to leave the day and still continue the work, not just do it one day and that's it. We need to do it every day, like organize different things and, you know, make these things happen. So I feel it could be a movement. I mean, yes. We can continue working towards it, and hopefully we will continue, hopefully reaching more people and having a much larger impact.
Yes. Khadijah, as you say that though, I wanted to also remind us that on that day 4 years ago, I think it is about faith leaders. Mm-hmm. But I do think that faith leaders are leaders of various bodies of folks whose lives are framed by their faith and by their religion. But it's interesting that we have had the presence and the involvement of folks who are not faith leaders per se, mm-hmm. but have been so impacted by the way in which the efforts that you put forth have evolved that it's brought them to the table. I especially remember that 4 years ago, one of the leading PIs and one of the vaccine sites here in the country bought into that experience and became wholeheartedly involved in it. You might remember Mike Kiefer, who was from up in Rochester. And, you know, Mike is someone who, I think that's what I like about the idea of the movement, because the spirit of a movement will transcend things that usually can represent difference. The intersection, I think, of science and faith is something that is critical, because, you know, it's not the issues we're dealing with in relationship to HIV and other complex infectious disease, you know, realities. One thing we've come to realize is that those who work on either side of that equation, neither is ultimately effective without the other. And when you recognize that, it brings a different level of respect, another level of appreciation, another effort to figure out how you weave those things together. I think what you've done has started that. And I think that it's one of the things that I would hope we continue to see, because if we continue to allow that aspect of what we do to grow, it's going to be a part of what will make a difference in terms of not only the spirituality and the faith side, but also the biomedical and the research side, because these things right now are very much inseparably tied together, but sometimes don't have the full breadth of appreciation for each other. But the more that happens, I think the more those creative energies are going to translate into something that will truly be extraordinary.
And I would say what we have done together has created this. And I didn't want to go back to a point you said before about the different languages and different cultures. I think that even though we come from diverse faiths and religions, we all have a common core about compassion, right? And about mercy. And that's the reason why Rahma was named Rahma, that means mercy in Arabic, and compassion. So every God that we follow, religion that we follow, has the concept of compassion and mercy. And you have to have that when you're doing this work. You have to have that when someone comes to you in your community and tells you, hey, I'm positive, you know, you have to have compassion. You don't need judgment. You don't need to, you know, disclose to the community what's going on. You need to have compassion and see how you can support them. With my work with Rahma, we had people that would tell me that their side was disclosed to the community without their permission. And then they walked in and people didn't want to sit next to them or touch the same things as them. And they didn't want to go back to their community. So it shows that we have a lot of work to do in our faith communities so that people feel welcome in any community they go to. So I think together, we can create those safe spaces, you know, regardless of our culture, of our identities, of our languages, of our views on life. Together, we can create those safe spaces in our communities, in our faith communities, to address that stigma. So this is what I hope will continue to keep happening. Hope we can do it together. That's the main important thing. I can't do it by myself. You can't do it by yourself. You only can do it collectively. So, you know, we'll see what 2021 brings. 2020 has been an interesting year. But we'll see what 2021 brings, and hopefully we can have an even more, you know, stronger, powerful, amazing NFHAAD.
What you just said speaks so powerfully to the significance of what happens when you can find common ground. When you can find common ground, there's a way in which it's one of the ways in which the barriers begin to be overcome, and the ways in which you can identify. I mean, all of the people that have been a part of this, if they have nothing else in common, there's a sense of appreciation for the value and for the divinity of human life. The idea of wanting to be in the business of helping with the healing and the reviving of the souls and the bodies of persons who are dealing with these realities of HIV and AIDS.
I agree with you. I can't top that.
I know.
Well, I think this has been a fruitful discussion. One of the common themes that I have heard today is that of oneness, that of togetherness. And I think it's a particularly powerful theme given the current context that we find ourselves in right now as it relates to being in the midst of yet another pandemic, a pandemic that has forced us apart, a pandemic that has told us that we must quarantine and we must social distance in order to get through. It really is encouraging to hear messages of oneness and togetherness as it relates to our common threads in our faith, in our traditions, but also in our mission to end the HIV and AIDS epidemic as a public health crisis. And so I'm really grateful for the work that has been begun with National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day. I'm even more thankful to be in personal relationship with both you, Reverend Sanders, and you, my sister, Khadijah. And I'm so grateful for what we've built together and look forward to our togetherness growing on this day and days to come. At this time, I'd like to invite our respondents, Ms. Vanessa Johnson and Bhikkhu Sāgarānanda Tien, to re-engage our discussion and to share with us your reflections. What did you hear? And in particular, what does this day, National Faith HIV and AIDS Awareness Day, mean to you, not only in your work, but in your faith and in your life? I invite Vanessa Johnson first to respond.
Thank you. I appreciate that and want to thank all of you who have put together this program and the organizers and the presenters and Ashley doing her thing up there in the corner. Thank you so much. And I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I was diagnosed with HIV in 1990, the same year I graduated from law school. So I have been on a journey with this disease, from complete hopelessness to a place where I'm at some peace and acceptance for how HIV has changed my life. And I'm also at somewhat peace and acceptance for what may happen with my life as we go forward. And a lot of that has had to do with my own personal faith and the faith of my family and friends and all those people who prayed for me since I have been on this earth. So I thank all of you. I thank all of them and know that I would not be here without that. My work in this field has been around the collaborations I've been able to form, first with the Balm of Gilead. So I was so happy to hear you all mention the Balm of Gilead, because, you know, a lot of people forget, really, they started a lot of this work. And I remember out of that work that they did, we formed a program. Arthur Butler, who's part of the staff with Reverend Mike at UCC, Open Your Heart. We started a program, and Reverend Sanders, you came and spoke a couple of times. I know we had you involved in that on some level. And so just to see from that point to where we have grown it makes me smile inside, if y'all know the joy inside of that. So what I want to do is focus on 4 things. We did contributions already: accessibility, interfaith, and themes. For me, accessibility, I think that what you have done is create something that's accessible to people to be involved in. And people are always looking for ways to get involved with church, but sometimes it's not going to church on Sunday. Sometimes it's doing things with, and I'm going to say church instead of faith-based, because that's the word I use that's what I was growing up with. That's what I know. Church. We going to church, everybody do that. Everybody got on the same page. And so y'all went to church. Y'all went to church, said we're going to bring the church to the people. And that's a good thing. You made it accessible by forming this day. And I think these days have to continue. I think about the leadership that the faith community has brought just to social justice in general, starting with the continuation of the Poor People's Movement by Reverend Barber in the Carolinas, the March on Washington that, his name is escaping me, but he's on MSNBC. You know, our Reverend Sharpton. Yes, he did the March on Washington. Everybody came. And now And that all came from all sparks from our churches, sparks from our faith. That could not have happened. That leadership could not have happened. I think what it enabled is for the church to become involved in HIV, because the church has always been involved in larger issues, always been involved in health issues, always been involved in how we were going to try to improve our lives. So and I'm not surprised that the church also wanted to take a bigger role in HIV. I'm very glad I did, because there's so many of us who want to come home. There's many of us who still want to come home, who want that safe place to be able to go and just be ourselves and to be embraced for who we are, inclusive of our HIV, inclusive, because all people want to be accepted for all the things that they're going through. I know that some people do not feel safe enough. So example is the young man we just lost, who didn't feel safe enough to tell people he had cancer. I feel bad, but I don't feel so bad, because I feel as though he's had the love and respect he needed while he was going through this, and the support. So that was good. And my last thing, because I don't know how much more time I have, I don't want to take all our responding time. Do I have another little bit? Okay, great. And the last thing I want to just say is that the faith involvement in the HIV movement has elevated the lived experiences of people living with HIV, and has really embraced us, for the churches and the faith-based organizations that are attuned to humanity have embraced us to the point where we're able to share our stories of triumphs and challenges. And that's a wonderful thing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vanessa, for that thoughtful and powerful reflection. I now invite Bhikkhu, Sāgarānanda, Tien, to also provide us with some words of reflection and to tell us what his experience has been with National Faith HIV/AIDS Awareness Day and how it has impacted his community.
Mm-hmm.
Bhikkhu, please.
Thank you, Dr. Burley. And it was my great honor to be able to get involved in this with what Khadijah had done. I think it's 2 years ago. We went on to a parade in the downtown Washington, D.C., along with all the peoples, and as well as from the people from my own Buddhist community. And my monk brothers and sister was on that walk at that time. And first of all, I would like to congratulate Khadijah for what you have done. And I truly admire what you have done for these minorities. And also, as well as what Reverend Sanders have just talked about. And this united, this collective efforts that we have put together through this platform with all the people is truly amazing. I'm truly admire what you have, your efforts and your dedication for not only raising the awareness, but actually we have implemented a lot of real programs, put boots on the ground to actually execute this program. It's truly amazing. And a lot of people get benefit from this program. And, coming from an Asian community, I was born and raised in Taiwan, and I was born in 1975. During my time growing up, this type of issue, HIV and AIDS, it was a taboo during my time growing up. And my first exposure to this issue was actually through some literature that was done by a great Chinese writer, Bai Xianyong, in his novels. And they have, actually Bai Xianyong is one of the most prominent writers in Chinese literature, and then he himself is one of the members of LGBTQ communities, and he's one of the authors and the writers that I admire the most, and also I would like to echo to what Dr. Burley just mentioned that about this oneness, we have definitely come along a long way from the time where W.E.B. Du Bois talk about this two-ness. So I will try to, your words remind me what he has wrote. Like, so I just want to quote it, and from an Asian American perspective. And I will just replace what he said about African American with Asian Americans. So in his book, The Soul of Black Folks, and especially in this chapter, he talked about our spiritual striving. So he said, and I quote, the history of here I replace his African American or with Asian Americans. The history of Asian American is the history of this strife, this longing to attain self-conscious manhood, to merge his double self into a better and truer self. In this merging, he wishes neither of the older self to be lost. She would not Asianize America, for America has too much to teach the world and Asian. And he would not bleach his Asian soul in the flood of white or mainstream Americanism, for he knows that Asian blood has a message for the world. He simply wishes to make it possible for a man to be both an Asian and American, and without being accursed and split upon his fellows, without having the doors of opportunity closed roughly in his face. This then is the end of his striving, to be a co-worker in the kingdom of culture, and to escape both death and isolation, to husband and use his best power and his latent genius. And so when I reflect on his word, and I think what I can do is to keep learning from this great community, the people from this great community, and we can work together and educate myself and also educate the people from my own congregation. And I will look forward to collaborate with you all in the future, and we can together will create this inclusiveness and for every people. And we can use this model that we created in this country, and then we can apply it to to any other community in the world. So thank you so much, and this is my reflection.
Thank you, Bhikkhu, and thanks to all of you. Thank you, Bhikkhu, for reminding us that really, our plight is one and the same in terms of our history, particularly as people of color in this country, as people who find themselves on the margins. And it's for that we should unite together as one around these issues that disproportionately impact us. So grateful for your reflection, Vanessa, mentioning the work of the Balm in Gilead and this nature of kind of duality of navigating life and all of its successes, but also in the midst of that, having to deal with a diagnosis in a world that stigmatizes the diagnosis, in a world that marginalizes people living with HIV, and the power that we can all harness when we can move past stigma. And so it's in that vein that I want to address one of the questions that we've received from one of our viewers. And that question is, what are some of the research priorities and questions around faith and HIV? And I think it's an important question, particular to the work that you do, Vanessa, with the Framework for Dialogue, as I know you all try and quantify stigma. And so maybe Vanessa, maybe Reverend Sanders, and anyone else who would like to address that. What are some of the research priorities and questions around faith and HIV. You have to take yourself off mute, Vanessa, so we can hear your beautiful words.
You know, I thought about that before you said that. Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that in terms of the specific research priorities, I'm not sure of, but I do know that the framework for dialogue is a research vehicle by which there's a three triangle partnership with people living with HIV as part of that triangle, the faith community, and then the public sector portion of the community. And so what we've tried to do with that is take the information from the Stigma Index Project, which is a questionnaire that asks people living with HIV what impacts them the most about this disease. And believe it or not, and you probably can't believe this, is that part of that shown that the church is a very important vehicle for people living with HIV in terms of some of the challenges that we have faced, some of the challenges that churches have brought forth on people living with HIV, particularly in the United States, and then some of the wonderful and beautiful things that have happened as a result of the faith community coming together and being involved. And I think I will go back to what has been said by Nada and the rest of the panelists, is that if maybe this is the one way that we can all work together to deal with stigma and to help people craft their narratives so that they can share their lived experiences.
Yeah. Reverend Sanders, in terms of the intersection of scientific research, faith, and HIV, we know that MCTAN, the technical assistance arm of the Metropolitan Church that you founded, for a while was the only faith institute in the country funded by the CDC to do capacity building work around HIV and AIDS. And so tell us a little bit about the goal of that initiative with MCTAN and how it was that you all were able to marry these ideas of research and faith and HIV and AIDS.
I think one of the things that we came to recognize was that there was already more common ground than we had taken time to really shine a light on to help people to be able to see really what was already before them. But sometimes the way in which issues are projected in society will translate into the kinds of responses that become evident in what looks like fragmentation and division. I think that what I have seen happen over time in the faith community is a kind of growth. It's an evolving appreciation for the ways in which it's not this great separation between science and faith, but rather there's a complement between the two that very often is spoken to, but not in a way that always brings to bear a full appreciation for how faith really is a part of it. Just even in terms of what's happened in our faith communities in recent years, with regard to issues of nutrition, with regard to the way in which environmental experiences end up being a part of what serves to undermine the full potentials of life of people in our communities, especially when they end up having the kinds of vulnerabilities that are the byproduct of immune systems that have been compromised, but also the ways in which we find ourselves realizing that at every level, the likelihood of there being a new generation that will have less of these vulnerabilities has a lot to do with what we began to have the good sense to do at the earliest stages of life. A lot of what ends up being a part of the complexity of the issues that we have, and it does, by the way, translate it translates into all kinds of stigmatizing realities for folks. So a person whose nutritional knowledge has been limited is more likely to end up having to deal with issues of obesity, is more likely to end up dealing with issues that will translate into that which makes them, at least on a superficial level, seem different from others. And in order to overcome these things, it's important to start. It's important to start at an earlier stage in life than we have done it in the past, and weave it into the fabric of our spiritual lives and experiences. There are many churches. We have a congregation in Nashville that I always have celebrated in the way in which, when dealing with some of the complexities of our inner city life, decided a program where they just simply took walks around the community as a congregation. And it's amazing the transformative impact that those walks had on their community in terms of behavior every day, on this, just on the everyday street level, but also just the way in which people start to feel differently about themselves. The stigma of life for people of color very often is something that begins with simply your complexion and dealing with the way in which you end up being seen instantly as somehow being the other, just because of this, what I like to refer to is the gift of this ebony glow that we carry around with us, because of the way in which the characterization of that glow. It really is interesting. It's even to the point of the way in which we know it's been used adversarially against us in a way that has turned it into a weaponizing kind of dynamic that creates more hurt and pain and shame than seemingly is anything that is merited. Well, it's definitely not merited, but that's even sensible. It's nonsensical, really, when you think about how some of these superficial things have come to be the basis upon which people are disenfranchised, marginalized, and pushed to the curb in life. It makes no sense. And increasingly, as the issues of social justice ministry, I think you mentioned earlier, Vanessa, the issues of social justice ministry, but I also think the kind of experiences that are part of the Buddhist tradition in terms of a greater sense of the value of the contemplative life and the ways in which there ends up being a spiritual way of thinking about oneness. I just, in the last couple of days, was sitting in a situation where I just saw a person walk into a restaurant and had a T-shirt on that read mindfulness. I mean, it's really interesting. I've seen a lot of people, and we all have worn our Black Lives Matter shirts. We've worn our shirts that talk, that carry the banners and the slogans of what's going on in the world around us. But I found it to be an interesting addition to that kind of projection of thought for somebody to walk around with a shirt on that says mindfulness. I'm saying that to say, okay, that the common ground, the point of intersection is there. It's just a matter of us lifting it up and celebrating it and incorporating it into our experiences in congregations and worship and the like. And that way, we'll have an avenue by which we'll get beyond some of the fragmentation that translates into stigmatization in our communities around disease.
Yeah. Ed, you talk about the weaponization of a color, or the weaponization of a diagnosis, or the weaponization of either a gender or a sexuality.
Yes.
One of the goals of this webinar series is not only to address the intersections of faith and HIV and AIDS, but also the intersections of race and racism, sex and sexism, sexuality and diverse gender identities. And so in that vein, one of the questions that we've received is from a long-term survivor who has stated that one of the most difficult parts of their lifetime living with HIV has been their banishment from their faith community for not only being HIV positive, but for also being gay. And noting that still having faith was unable to return to their initial birth religions because of this stigma, this banishment. And so then how do we reach those kinds of people who have been living with the stigma of HIV, people who have been living with the stigma of that ebony hue, or the stigma of their gender, or the stigma of, in this case, their sexuality, who have left their faith, who have left their church or their religion. How do we reach those people? How do we bring them back in? And then I'm going to add to that a question specifically for Khadijah that addresses the intersection of gender. This is the second week where we have featured a young or an African-American woman who had a vision and started a movement of something that has grown and has been able to do so within the context of faith that very much so still prioritizes men and are built on the foundations of patriarchy. And so the one question is, how do we reach out to people who have left the church as a result of the stigma they've received because of their diagnosis, but also because of their identity? And then the second question is specifically for my sister Khadijah, how is it that you continue to make strides, not only as a woman, but as a Black woman, but as a Black Muslim woman, doing this work of HIV and AIDS? And then we're going to close out our conversation for today.
Okay, make sure I remember both questions. So for the first question, with Faith Awareness Day, we've had people that are part of the planning that are part of the LGBTQI plus community. And we do that intentionally because everyone matters. And so we want to hear their voices too on how the best way to reach the faith community to make sure we're creating safe spaces and we're inclusive of all. So they have been very helpful in reaching different people. And when we had our first Awareness Day, we had a very, very diverse group, comprised LGBTQI+, comprised of cisgender, people from all different backgrounds, identities were there. So, and we know that a lot of institutions that people do not feel safe due to gender identity or the HIV status. So one of our goals, again, is to raise awareness and create safe spaces. And there are affirming places, but not all are. So, I mean, we do have some strides to go, but the main thing is addressing HIV stigma and creating a safe space, and we're trying to work hard to do that. And we invite you, the person asked the question, to join us if you are interested, so that we can work together to make things happen so you feel safe in your community. Before I answer the next question, I don't know if anyone else has any response to that question as well. If not, I can answer the second one, but I'll give a moment just in case.
I think you're doing great.
In regards to patriarchy, well, that is an interesting question. Years ago, when I started Rahma, there was a faith leader that said to me that I should not be leading Rahma because I'm a woman. And that, I was like, whoa, but it's not my first rodeo with patriarchy. It's not my first, but it kind of pushed me even more to continue doing the work that I'm doing. And when people say things like that, it actually doesn't sway me. It pushes me to be like, okay, somebody needs the work to be done, because the things that you're saying shows is the proof of why I have to do this work. So I work with a lot of men in this work, and it doesn't faze me. I think we are in this together, not of our gender. So it's not the point. The point is addressing stigma. So yes, I've had people say that to me, being a Black Muslim woman, they should be leading this because you're a woman and you're Muslim, and we should have a Muslim man leading it, and so on and so forth. And I challenge that ideology. I can lead it as a Black Muslim woman, and I can lead it as a Black Christian woman or a Black Jewish woman if I was to be that, in that religion. So I think we have to drop those patriarchy ideas and realize anyone can do the work. And I invite everyone to do this work together. I mean, I can't do it myself, but I can try to get a start to it. So I think that we have to kind of challenge those sayings and those thoughts, because it kind of creates a barrier, and it's another way of ostracization. And that's my opinion.
Thank you, Khadijah. And thanks to all of you. Reverend Edwin Sanders, thank you to Vanessa Johnson, thank you to Bhikkhu, Sāgarānanda, Tien, and thank you to our interpreter, Ashley, for your service, for your work, for your stories, and for your faith. We just want to also thank our guests and our participants who joined in today, who engaged and asked questions. We invite you to share this with your friends, that they might be able to glean something from it even after this live viewing. It'll be accessible on our Facebook pages and also on our YouTube page. And so we invite you to follow up. Maybe there's some things that you missed. Maybe there are some things that you want to revisit because it impacted you profoundly. And so follow up and share with others. We want to bring to your attention a number of other events that are happening around National Faith HIV and AIDS Awareness Day, what has become a weekend of events. Tomorrow, Monday, August 31st, there will be a Buddhist prayer led by one of our respondents, Bhikkhu Sāgarānanda, at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And so we invite you to turn into what I imagine will be a great meditative prayer at 3 p.m. Eastern time at our Facebook page, Faith AIDS Day. And then also, we invite you to join a town hall discussion at 5 p.m. Eastern time. Get out and vote. HIV and COVID are indeed on the ballot. Not only are we in a year of a pandemic, but we are in a year of perhaps the most consequential election, at least in my lifetime. And we want to make sure that the issues of HIV and AIDS, but also COVID-19 don't get lost in the discussion as it relates to the issues that are important to us that we want to communicate to our elected officials. And so join us for that. And then also save the date for the HIV Interfaith Conference, Resilience and Renewal, Faith in the HIV Response, that will happen over the span of 3 days, beginning on September 22nd and ending on September 24th. The HIV Interfaith Conference is an international engagement that will feature some of the speakers who you've already heard, but many speakers from around the world. And it hopes to create a space for sharing, for capacity building, an opportunity to celebrate and be inspired and recommit to the HIV response, but also a space to dialogue and identify joint actions where we might address the challenges, but also the emerging issues as it relates to these intersections of faith and HIV globally. And so please attune yourself to all of these things. Subscribe to or like our Facebook page so that you can engage this information on social media. And some of you have also subscribed to our email thread. And so thank you for that. And I just want to send out another word of gratitude to everyone, our panelists, but also our participants. And may God bless you, and may God keep you, and may God keep us together. Thank you, and we look forward to engaging you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Burley.